All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's session as part of the DPI Arts Education Team's series on supporting learning differences. Today is the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, or MTSS, for arts educators. What does that mean for me is probably what you're all thinking. Just a quick note that we will be recording this webinar and posting it to our webinar archive. So especially those of you that are arts coordinators or district leaders, or even just working within your school that would like to share this with other people, we highly recommend that you do so. So when you get that link to the webinar archive, share it with as many people as you think would benefit from this. You can also click on the bit.ly at the bottom of the screen, or we posted that in the chat, to follow along with the slide deck and access it later if you wish. There's also participant notes that have a little image of each of the slides and then notes to go along with those. So that's a great thing for you to follow along with when we get to our main speakers for today as well. And then you'll notice on this homepage, each of these are clickable links, and most of you know that, but you can click on each of these to get to more information about us, especially our Facebook page and our Google homepage, which is the little splash at the bottom, where you'll find all of our valuable resources that you'll want to share with your colleagues and other teachers. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce ourselves to you. My name is Sayward Grinley. I am your dance and visual arts consultant for DPI. My arts ed team member is Brandon Rader. He is your music and theater arts consultant, and you'll hear from him in just a moment. And then he and I work closely together as a team. So even though we have our individual content areas, we really work together on all 4 arts areas. So you can always reach out to either one of us for any of your arts education questions. Also, I'd like to introduce our section chief for social studies and arts education and former theater educator is Dr. Lori Major Carlin. She's not here with us today, but we really appreciate all that she does to support us and arts education. And then we're super excited today to have some special guests. We have Beth Rice and Ann Nixon here to share their insight on MTSS and supporting learning differences. I'm going to let them say hi and just introduce themselves very quickly. So Beth.
It's great to be here with you, and I'm Beth Rice from IAB, and I help to lead our practices work, and also our state is a part of CASEL's Collaborating States Initiative, and I lead the team at the state level that is really moving some pretty powerful work. So very grateful for this opportunity to be with you today. So thank you.
Great. And we also have Ann here with us today, if Ann would like to say hello.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name's Ann Nixon. I am Regional Student Supports with the Integrated Academic and Behavior Systems team. My work is primarily around social emotional learning and mental wellness, and I too am excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much. So a few housekeeping reminders that videos are encouraged. We always love seeing your faces and talking to real people, but not necessarily if you don't feel comfortable. Please use the chat for any questions that you have, and we will answer those. Write anything that you are curious about in there, and when we have a moment, we will make sure to ask our speakers about those questions. And if you're having any tech problems, you can put those in the chat, and we'll try to see if we can help you troubleshoot those as well. And then just try to remember to stay muted so that we can hear the presentation. All right. On the next slide, you'll see just a little overview of our WebEx screen, which is our state mandated program. This is a reminder of your screens and controls. So just take a moment to find where your chat button is. So it tells you right there on the screen. You should be able to find that little button to look at where your chat is and your video layout if you want to see things a little bit differently on your screen. All right, on the next slide, we're going to just talk about our series of supporting learning differences in arts ed. So we've already done several sessions on virtual tools to support learning differences. And obviously today we're focusing on MTSS. And we have a few other things in the works, some specially designed instruction or SDI workshops, arts ed differentiation workshops. And we are in the process of trying to create a SIOP supports for ELL's course. And we are also working on a sensory-friendly concerts and classrooms workshop that will be in collaboration with the North Carolina Symphony. For today's agenda, we are going to include an understanding of MTSS for arts educators, and we'll also give you time for some reflection and Q&A, and then we'll finish up with your closure. But primarily, we're going to let Beth and Ann do their thing and talk to you all about MTSS. So I'll turn it over now to Brandon for our welcoming activity.
All right, so today for our welcoming activity, we're all gonna do 25 push-ups. So, all right, everybody get up, all right, and find a comfortable place. Oh, wait, just a second. If you don't, or if you feel like 25 push-ups is too easy, you can go ahead and go grab your toddler and throw them on your back. Or if you think that that might still be too easy, you can put your feet up on the coffee table. And if you feel like it's too difficult for you, you can go ahead and use a wall to do your push-ups against, or even being on your knees instead of your toes. That's totally fine. All right, so you don't actually have to do the 25 push-ups. And yeah, 14 is great. 14 miles, James. Of course you did. Our point is that if 25 isn't enough, is too many, maybe today it's 14 and tomorrow it's 13, but then the next day it's 14 and then the next day it's 15. And we can make modifications to continue to grow and get stronger, because that's the idea, is to grow and to increase our ability. And so that's kind of what we're here for today, is to be able to go ahead and look at the different ways that we can adjust the instruction for our students in the way that makes sure that they actually are always growing. So if you want to do your 25 push-ups in this while you're listening to us, you are more than welcome to, but you don't actually have to. All right.
Thank you, Brandon. So today for our webinar goals, we will include understanding what the multi-tiered systems of support framework is. Again, that's MTSS. Identify the common language and resources to support arts education of students through the MTSS framework, and identify how arts educators fit into this framework. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Brandon to start this first section here.
So I was just trying to calculate if I still had enough time to actually do my push-ups, but I guess the answer is no. That's okay. So we think that it's really important to remember that we're always stronger together, and especially when we work cross-collaboratively with other areas. But not to forget that we're the only one in the building sometimes who is teaching our content. These days, most likely the only educator in our house, if not on the block. But you're not alone. We are definitely here for you. So just a reminder that North Carolina Public Schools serves 1.55 million students in 2,500 public schools across 386 public school units. And in those 2,500 public schools, there are over 7,000 teachers teaching all 4 arts areas. So you are not alone. We wanted to celebrate just a little bit of the arts ed graduation requirement that was legislated in early July. If you are familiar with the graduation requirement in your local LEA, you are one of the lucky few who have had that in your local area, but now it is legislated by the entire state legislature to have every single student have at least 1 arts credit between 6th and 12th grade. And we are currently in the works of trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but that will take effect with students entering grade 6 in the year 2022. So that's fall of 2022. In North Carolina, we teach within the Comprehensive Arts Education Framework. And those 3 components of the comprehensive arts education are independent and are found by the task force formed in 2010 to be completely necessary. And we encourage all educators to look for opportunities to partner within their local organizations to bring arts education, arts integration, and arts exposure to authentic experiences to our students, even within this virtual framework that we're currently in. Speaking of frameworks, if you've been to any of our previous Making Lemonade sessions, you know how much I love this framework. If you don't know about it, no problem. You can learn all about it. Come back to the slide later. It is a framework published by the Friday Institute and the North Carolina Department of Instruction, really spelling out 7 different categories of ways that teachers can address the needs of our students in a way that's still providing a rigorous and meaningful instruction. Oh, I apologize. That took me to the actual document. As Sayward mentioned earlier, everything is clickable. Everything is hyperlinked. We like clickable. All right. So in 2019, in November, we joined the Collaborating States Initiative through the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, sometimes called CASEL, and formed a CASEL Collaborating States Initiative team, also referred as the North Carolina SEL team, or implementation team. And we really recognize that the arts connect to SEL in a special way. So we immediately began putting together the natural connections between the arts and SEL core competencies, which can be found both in brief in the CASEL wheel here and very in depth in the guidance documents, which are hyperlinked in the middle there. We've started and will continue to provide arts and SEL content specific arts ed. It says PLCs, that should be changed to professional development throughout 2020 and in the future. Before we jump too far into MTSS, we just wanted to talk about a couple things to clarify any misconceptions, because again, today we're going to be talking a lot about literacy and numeracy, which I don't want you to check out, because this is not one of those MTSS or any professional developments that's just aimed at like the general populace and arts educators have to sit in on it, even though you're thinking that it doesn't pertain to you. I've been in those meetings and this is not one of them, okay? So we wanted to just point out literacy as a gateway skill. So I wanted to share just one story from my teaching past. In my third year of teaching, I was finally was able to put to work my secondary science license as well as my music license in a school where I taught chorus and earth and environmental science. But I quickly learned that my students were functionally illiterate, and I had to throw the textbook out, just right out. It was completely unusable. In light of the fact that my students were unable to comprehend any sort of grade level appropriate text, while still acknowledging the fact that I remained responsible to actually teach them that content, I pivoted to a hands-on lab and project-based classroom. So most of those days were spent discussing a lab, doing a lab, or debriefing from a lab. And all of that preceded any sort of work on literacy, such as reading a Scholastic article that was still on the same content, but maybe was on an elementary reading level instead, or writing about that work. Literacy was addressed explicitly even inside the science classroom, but it was addressed separately from the actual content of my science classroom due to the student population I had. And that experience in that high school really informed the way that I approached all of the needs of my students in elementary music across the next 7 years. It didn't matter if it was a child who was an EL, EC, needed extra time reading or writing, or any other quote unquote learning difference students may have. You know, you're still responsible for teaching the students the content, even when literacy or numeracy, you know, especially for us dealing in fractions, gets in the way. So we still have to figure out how we can meet the needs of those kids. I'm going to hand it off to Sayward just for a minute to illustrate her experience with literacy as well.
Yeah, so mine is actually sort of two scenarios from two different grade levels. So in the beginning, when I was teaching at a pre-K through third grade school, they had several things that were done school-wide to really support literacy, because obviously those students are beginner readers. They're, you know, really learning things from the very beginning. And so everything in the school, for directions, entering, exiting procedures, class procedures, everything had the words and pictures to go along with it. So there was always a picture with everything to go along with it. So everything in your classroom, you were required to have anything that was written had a picture associated with it. And then we also worked really hard to make sure everything went from left to right. So as though you would do it when you're naturally reading on a book, right? So everything in your classroom is set up to go from left to right, high to low. and even in alphabetical order if you have several things. So just trying to just set up even the structure of your classroom. And I didn't even realize how much of that really made a difference. But some other things that I ended up also doing were, I was teaching in a dance classroom. So if we did action words, I would laminate the words so that I could hold up the word and the students could also look at it and read it and associate that word with the verbal and the physical of doing it. And they started learning these things a little bit more. And also we incorporated things like eye tracking exercises or cross-lateral movement, getting both sides of the brain working, even things like crawling on the floor, which is shown in research to really activate the brain in that horizontal level to take in information. So when students skip the crawling phase, they actually have trouble with reading later. And rhythm activities, dealing with sounding out syllables and looking at the rhythms. So I was doing all of these for that grade level. And then when I moved to teaching middle school, and I was teaching at a school that had much lower reading scores, the principal and other teachers started coming to me saying, what is it that you're doing in your classroom that's making a difference? Because we see students that are increasing their reading level just after they've had you for a semester. And so we started incorporating some of these same things across school-wide at the middle school level as well. And it showed great improvement in the students overall. So those are just some things that can be done school-wide, structure-wide, no matter what type of classroom you are in.
And so we're not going to talk today about, incorporating literacy into our classrooms. We're not going to go there. What we are pointing out is just the fact that literacy is a prerequisite for so much that we do. So I dropped into the chat if you want to join in. Where do you see literacy and numeracy in your contents? Obviously, even though not necessarily numeracy, geometry shows up everywhere in visual arts. But we chose 4 different standards here, just from our standard course of study, where literacy is implied. It's assumed already. In order for kids to successfully master these 4 objectives, they have to already have literacy skills. But what happens if they don't have literacy skills? What sorts of things are happening outside of your classroom to help support that? And sometimes I know that we feel like these things we have to tackle alone, but there really are supports in place at your school that especially are addressing any of these lapses, any of these needs for support in especially literacy and numeracy on a whole school-wide basis. Now, and so we didn't even choose any of the obvious ones like reading about history, right? Because obviously that's important. But in order to critique art, you have to be able to write that. In order to design a criteria, you have to be able to write a rubric, right? And so there's a lot that is just assumed about the literacy levels of our students. Now, talking about things that we do for all students, we just wanted to define the word core instruction for everybody before we go any further. When Beth and Anne today talk about core instruction, what they're talking about is the instruction that everybody in the entire school receives. So that's not any sort of support that an English learner would get. It's not any sort of support that somebody would get for reading pullout groups or for any sort of intervention work or any EC resource teacher. It's what does every single person in the school receive. So most of the time, especially if you're in the elementary school level, that includes you guys, right? It's the instruction that is offered to every student. So that's still offered. So even if you're in the secondary school, arts teachers, you are definitely included in this definition of core instruction. And then you'll see the way they kind of break it out beyond that from there.
Especially with our new arts ed graduation, it is a graduation requirement. It is definitely part of the core.
Wonderful. So I just want to share some of the things that are in the chat really fast. Understanding the lyrics to a song, basic measurements. Exactly. Measurements are essential for numeracy. Learning about artists, descriptions for art criticism, being able to, look at, reading directions. That's super important. How often do we have kids who do an entire assignment wrong just simply because they either didn't read the instructions or didn't understand the instructions? That's such a good one. All right, so now that we've kind of framed what Beth and Ann are going to share with us, without any further ado, here is the incredibly mysterious multi-tiered system of supports for arts educators.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Sayward. So you are welcome to follow along with that bit.ly. It's going to have you make a copy. And the idea with that is just that all the notes are pretty much already there. So you don't have to have any stress with having to capture anything unless you want to add to what's already there. So when you click on that link, or you can use the bit.ly, that will take you to what we call participant notes. And what you'll see on the document is it'll have a picture of the slide image, so you kind of know where we are. And then you're to the right of that, we'll see all the key points. We also did go ahead and just link activities. So our promise to you is we're gonna go no more than about 4 slides before you're gonna be doing some type of processing. And we're also gonna keep moving pretty rapidly. So we'll go ahead and go and look at a little bit more specific learning targets. And then Brandon and Sayward, y'all let me know if I start, you can't hear me.
Okay, no problem.
We can go and go to the next slide.
I'm on the learning target side.
Oh, okay, I'm just not seeing it. Okay, fantastic.
That's okay.
So we really have 4 learning targets. First, we're going to be really building, adding to, affirming your common language and understanding of MTSS. We're going to look pretty high-level balcony view at the 6 critical components, and you'll do an activity where you select one that you want to go a little bit deeper with. We'll look at the integrated system, and we'll kind of break it apart across academics, attendance, behavior, and social emotional. And then we'll also, throughout this work, be exploring your role in your schools or in your district's MTSS work. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our pulse check. And for that, we'll go ahead and we just want to kind of take a pulse check. It'll help inform us, but it'll also help you to be aware of the wisdom that is in this virtual space with you. So what do you already know or believe about MTSS? And you can put your thoughts there in the Padlet link. And we're just going to kind of give a moment, maybe about a minute, for you to think about that and add to that Padlet.
Sayward, are you seeing the Padlet or the slide deck right now?
I see Padlet.
I see the Padlet. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Christy, you are just on top of it. So we've got the whole gamut here.
And we invite you, after you add for yourself, to definitely check out what your colleagues have said. Okay, so definitely affirming some of what we hear from a lot of people across the state around the 3 tiers. That is normally what people mostly know. And also the colors, the red, yellow, and green. So that is also a common place that I'd say many of us are as we think about MTSS. Definitely like seeing that, there's this focus on the full support for students, supporting the whole child. Seeing this, the SEL, IST, and ILT. So I'm thinking that is some of the maybe teaming structure work and working more comprehensively. And Brandon, are y'all still hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, yay. All right. So definitely, if you haven't finished, keep adding to that. We'll come back and look at that again, and I'll go ahead and move on to. So what we're going to do now, we're really going to build on what you already have, what you already know, affirm, and then maybe even bring some enhancement to what you already think about in regards to an MTSS. So we're going to look at the definition, and you'll also see that in your participant notes. And this definition is changed a little bit from when we first started statewide rollout in 2015-2016 school year. And as you look at that definition, you may see some different words that kind of jump out at you. It may be some of the very same words that you put into the Padlet. So again, affirming what you already know and believe around a multi-tiered system of support. But the next slide, we're going to kind of pull out some of those words, and it may be what that you already thought about. There may be some new words that we start to think about as we're thinking about what is a multi-tiered system of support, and then especially what does that mean to me. So words like framework, and of course those whole child pieces, so academic. We talk also a lot about attendance and specifically preventing and making changes for students that are dealing with chronic absenteeism. We talk about behavior. We talk about social emotional, especially in regards to social emotional learning. We talk about the system. So those are the adult teaming structures that help to support all of, well, our adults, but then also our students across the building, across the district. Of course, we're going to look some more at being data-driven and what's some of the data pieces that are informing our work. Problem solving, because it's not that we're trying to fix people. What we're really going to be focused on is focusing on the factors that we can in fact control, which are instruction, curriculum, the environment, and then making sure that we're using the data that was for what it was designed to be used for. And then as Brandon and Sayward did such an eloquent job of kicking us off, we're really focused on all. So as we think about a multi-tiered system of support, we're thinking about all students. We are also thinking about all of our adults. So we're going to go ahead and do our next engaging strategy. And this is just it's going to get us into a fact check. So if when you started this conversation, you were thinking about that this is really about a process for students that are significantly behind. Well, that's a part of it, but that's not all of it. So one thing we really hope to do is to expand that thinking. We're not talking about like one specific program. This is the place where you pull everything together and where hopefully the goal is that the kids' day makes sense. And in order for the students' day to make sense, it's got to also make sense for our adults. We're also not talking just specific to one grade level or one grade span. Really, we want this work to extend across all, and that means pre-K through 12th grade. And then also, as Brandon and Sayward kicked us off already talking about, this is not just specific to a particular population or subgroup. Again, this is about all students. So we're going to pause here, give you a moment to click on the MTSS fact sheet that is in your participant notes. And you're welcome to, you'll just do a quick skim of that. And then you've got a place there that you can start to jot down any new learning. And I'm just going to pause for maybe about a minute as folks are ready. If you just, you can put ready in the chat window and I'll know to move on. So you're clicking on that MTSS fact sheet. You're thinking about maybe any new vocabulary or new thoughts that you're adding to your definition. And then when you're ready, we'll move forward.
if when you're done with writing it in your reflection notes, you can go ahead and share out in the chat if you feel so inclined. It's always great to learn from one another.
And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but you see some new learning, or you may just see a question, something that you may want to put a question in the chat window as well.
I just realized that I've been speaking and not a single person has been able to hear me. This is like the 8th time I've done that today. I was just sharing out that it seems to have step-by-step information, and it provides a flow for what students already know and what they need to know. Learning about ECATs, and not thinking about leadership when we hear about MTSS. Awesome. Great.
So thank you all for your insight. And I just, any opportunity that we have to listen, I think is just, it's so helpful, you know, it helps us with moving forward and knowing where to go. So we also think as we continue in this conversation, you're going to hear a little bit more about ECATs. You're going to hear some more in just one moment about leadership as we're thinking about these 6 critical components. Before we jump into that though, there's 2 quotes that we wanted to really pay forward, because both of these next quotes actually came from the field as we've been supporting this work over the past 5 years. And you know, when you know, we're doing good work, you are doing good work, and why not share it? So this first quote here is really about the 2 big E's, which we love, that it's effective for students and is efficient for adults. So you may consider, as you talk about MTSS with others, or you're reflecting on your role, maybe thinking about the 2 big E's, effective for students, efficient for adults. And then we also really appreciate this second quote. And we think this also really speaks to our time together today, because this is really about the teams and bringing the people together, helping to create a space for you also at the table, and using that to identify and define both what's working and scaling up what is working so that we can get that to all students. And Brandon, I have to also just give you and say we're both a shout out. When you talked about this community across the state, that is where the power is, and realizing that you are a part of this bigger system of support in regards to our education. And then finally, the words there on the right-hand side. So we tell our folks that if we are on the right track, then what we should be hearing back is that MTSS is making the difficult job of teaching easier, and it's increasing student achievement. So it's really about both. And if we're not hearing that, then we know we still have work to do. Okay, so that is going to wrap up that first section in terms of just kind of common language, building on our definition, and we're going to jump into these critical components. And so here on the screen, what you see are all 6 critical components. We already heard from you that sometimes you're not really thinking about leadership as much when you're thinking about MTSS. So what we're going to invite you to do is to individually pick one of these critical components. So either leadership, building the capacity or infrastructure, communication and collaboration, data-driven problem solving, 3-tiered instruction and intervention, or data evaluation. And you've got a one-page document there. It's called the Critical Component Handout, and it's also linked in your participant notes. You're going to pick that one critical component that you want to look at, open up the handout, and skim that paragraph. And then what we're going to invite you to do is to post what we're saying, one good find in the Padlet. So we're going to pause first, give you a moment you're picking one of those critical components. You're kind of skimming that to get a little bit more information, and then we're going to post it and look at what our community today has added to the Padlet. And I'll pause.
Just a quick note about Padlet. Don't forget that since there are 6 sections, if you scroll to the right, you'll find data evaluation. So make sure that you scroll to the right. I know it's hard to stop at reading just one paragraph. We've got lots and lots of good content. If you just scroll to the right, I'm on a Mac, so I just use 2 fingers and swipe to the right. But you should have some sort of scroll bar down here at the bottom where you can scroll to the right as well. I hope. I love this. Requires ongoing PD, coaching, and scheduling that actually allows teacher to plan. So true. It's a big thing that I know we struggle with as arts teachers, especially elementary specialists who, are teaching the students of the teachers as they get together and work together to work on how to implement some or any sort of supports. So finding time to get all of that child's teachers in the room is always difficult. Yeah, all children fall under tier 1. That's sort of that idea of core. It's what every single student gets. It's the sort of stuff that Sayward was talking about like having a picture with a word or a picture with an instruction or always doing things from left to right. Data evaluation, not just student outcomes, right? There's a lot of data out there.
And I also want to give a shout out to whoever posted that first one under communication and collaboration and having the courage, feeling empowered, I think, to reach out to families that some of their students were having some difficulty with getting their work completed, and also providing the resource to make it really clear about how to get that online work completed. So that's awesome. And I think that the 2 things that really jumped out at me is the word courage. And then the second one is that the resource that you were able to share, because we're all learning right now, and it's so huge. So this is fantastic. And so and I don't know, Brandon, are there any other ones, because mine's loading a little bit slower, that are Sayward or Ann that we'd really like to kind of lift up for the whole community?
It's just, I think, especially pertinent for you and your team, talking about how social emotional ties in to all of this, and how really, if you haven't watched the introduction to integrating SEL into arts education, please definitely go back. But it's basically the same sort of idea of what sort of emotional or social and emotional supports can you give to the whole school, and then, you know, specific to this class and specific to that child, how do you empower them? MTSS is very similar to what supports do we provide the whole school, and then a smaller group of students, and then a very targeted group of students. So that's a great connection that you had. Wonderful.
And I think that's the perfect segue to go ahead and jump into this next part, where we're thinking across these 4 domains. So really, when we're thinking about integrated systems, we're looking across academics, attendance, behavior, and social emotional. And a goal when we're thinking about this, or a basic belief, in order for this to be successful, is that we want all of our students to have access to a high quality core instruction. And what we know about that, you were talking about planning. In order for that to happen, the only way that that will happen is if we have time to plan. And again, when we get to the social emotional, you're going to have option of looking at the SEL standards mapping table, and although I didn't link the recordings, but you'll at least be able to look at those documents so we can make sure you've got the recordings if needed. So if you'll go ahead and go 2 slides, and then we also know that we want to make sure that the supports that our students are receiving, it's aligned with what their needs are. Y'all know this, post-COVID, we have many more students that are at risk, and certainly a part of that is because we've had a major disruption in like typical education, and so we're all adapting. So I'm going to share this part with you, and then if we need to do more with thinking, and I know Brandon and Sayward, you already shared some resources with adapting to remote instruction for arts education. If we need to have some more conversation around that, we're happy to do that. But still, the way that we think about this work and how we align where we put our resources, it aligns with this bar graph. And so that's really most of the resources, most of the planning is actually going into core support. And again, when we're talking about core, that is the support that all students, pre-K through 12, across a district, across the school building, across every single grade level, across every single classroom receive. And when we're thinking about that, supplemental is just for some students. So that is those smaller groups of students that have some identified needs. And then we'd also know that we may have some students that have some intensive needs. And that's going to be based off of a team that's equipped and looking at how the students are responding to a standard treatment protocol. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I won't go too deep. Big piece. Next slide. We love this quote. Think it's powerful, and maybe it speaks to you as well, but it is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so the best prevention is a strong, differentiated core. And this core support is both defined and designed to give most students the best chance of achieving success. Schools often realize that you can't intervene your way out of a faulty core. And certainly right now, as we're thinking about supporting students during COVID, this is a time that we still really need to think about what is it that all of our students need. So we're going to get into a chat activity. So based off of those last 4 slides, we're just going to invite you to reflect on either those different content areas that we talked about in terms of academics, attendance, behavior, and social emotional, or it may be about all students receiving a high quality instruction and matching needs to support. It may be around what core is all, a supplemental is some, intensive is few, or that rising tide lifts all boats. And we'd invite you just to connect with your colleagues by sharing one new learning and something maybe that you want to repeat in the chat window. So we'll go ahead, if you could reflect on one thing maybe that you would like to repeat from one of those last 4 slides, and we'll put that in the chat window.
I'm not going to lie that I got distracted by responding. Am I supposed to be on this slide or another one?
It's the next one. You're fine.
Okay.
I think
Sorry.
it's the connect one. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
That's what we want, Brandon. That's all good.
Yeah, I was, Rebecca, what she wrote really spoke to me. That was my experience as an elementary music teacher as well. I didn't understand how a lot of the experiences I had that just like felt like I was climbing up this hill by myself could have been alleviated just by me being part of the MTSS team. And then, you know, I don't think I understood what was going on. And we met after school specifically to include the reading specialists and the EC teachers and all the interventionalists and such. And so I definitely could have been part of the team, but I think that it was my own lack of understanding that kept me from doing it, which is why I didn't want anyone else to have a lack of understanding, which is why we're having this webinar.
And we'll continue to provide more support that we need. So.
Yeah, Jared, SEL is so important. That's why I really loved the Friday Institute's framework. Is it actually says, you know, SEL is super important. I have one very good friend who teaches physical education, and he said that last spring he ended up, since it's a hybrid PE and health class, he ended up tending to the mental and emotional needs of his students to ensure their health for the majority of the time from March until the end of the year, and still was able to actually knock off a bunch of his standards, but that became the important thing to teach the child first.
Yes. And it starts with that relationship. And I imagine that many of you are highly gifted in creating and supporting those relationships with our students. So as those responses continue to come in, I'm going to go ahead, and this next part we're going to walk through pretty high level, but you've got a resource for academic, attendance, behavior, and social emotional. So as we're thinking about academic support, so again, we're talking about core. We are really trying to go after things that are effective for most students. A number that we sometimes equate with this is really thinking about that it's working for about 80%. So most of our students with core supports alone, it's enough to get them on track. We define it through looking at instruction, curriculum, environment, and data evaluation. The link that you have there in your participant notes, we don't need to click on it, but it will walk you through a little bit more about what does instruction, curriculum, environment, and data evaluation, what do those words kind of mean, just in a really broad sense as you think about core across an entire school. So this is not specific to any one academic area, but it's general. Also, when we're thinking about strengthening core, so of course, this is going to be something that's huge. Really, when we look across the state, we're not yet where we want to be, and certainly as we're adapting to and supporting our students right now with COVID and these transitions, we know we all need help with strengthening core. It's been a huge shift both for our adults and for our students and for our families and communities. So you've got a couple of different ways that we can strengthen core. So certainly really thinking more about explicit instruction, also really looking at what's the feedback that's effective and actionable for students, making sure that we're building in enough opportunities for practice, and then that we're providing that scaffolding. So, and I think both Brandon and Sayward in their examples at the beginning really talked some about some ways that they built in some scaffolding to where it would help pretty much any student that was in their classroom to be successful. And then we even kicked off with the example of the push-ups and ways to think about how that we could all really be set up to be successful with that. So in terms of behavior, we have some resources that help you to think through student engagement, and you're going to see a link there, and we don't have to click on it, but for student engagement, it just helps you to think pretty broad around engagement. We are not just talking about students that are compliant, but we're really thinking about engaging the whole child, that cognitive engagement, thinking about that affective piece. So the whole child, and if you check out that resource, it'll expand that. Also, as we're thinking about some of those core behavior practices, so that we're teaching expectations, this is really critical right now. Everybody's world, and in terms of what day-to-day instruction looks like, is different right now. And so remote learning or even blended learning right now and teaching those expectations is critical. There is a link there to that core behavior practices, which will outline how to do that. Also, how to build in acknowledgement and consequence systems, explicit instruction, and then those adult routines. So you should find all of that through the links in the participant notes. As we already shared around social emotional learning, we did share the SEL standards mapping table, so you can see the great work that some of you may have helped to collaborate and create some of this, from my understanding how it was created. But you can see those standard mapping resources that were created for dance, music, theater, and visual arts. And so we certainly encourage you to go there, and then also to check out the recording where we had webinar series in October. And there's some additional resources that are a part of that. And then finally, with attendance practices. So y'all, this is really big right now, and sometimes we approach it maybe more from a sense of kind of, well, in some places punitive, but really what we want to do, and there's the team at your school and in your district should be monitoring chronic absenteeism, and the threshold for that is the 10%. So you're actually looking at a percent instead of a number of days. But so also some strategies on that handout from Attendance Works that helps you with thinking about monitoring data. Again, should be a team in your school and in your district that is doing this on a broader scale. Also, how to engage students and parents, recognizing those good and improved attendance, because that's huge. That's what we're going after, is improvement, and really trying to close that gap. How to provide personalized early outreach, and then helping to remove barriers to attendance. So for our activity, we'd love you just in the chat window to share a practice that you already have in your classroom or in your remote environment that as a part of a team to support academic, behavior, attendance, or social emotional learning. And we'll pause for you to add those responses to the chat window. So you're sharing a practice that's already something that you're using in your classroom, and that it may support more than one area, or you can think about it for one area: academics, behavior, attendance, or social emotional learning.
So Beth, it's my understanding that basically all the different categories that you just shared with us are things that an MTSS team would be the ones to come and collaborate together to ensure student success. That's correct, right?
Yes, and so one of the things that we have supported both districts and then also helped them to support their schools with is to do something we call defining core, and you do that work across each of those four buckets. And for that social emotional work, Brandon, the core SEL practices course that we've been, and Sabre, that we've been working through as a state SEL team, like that is a course available to the field. It's really focused at the team level, not like for every individual educator, but it really helps you. That's the culminating activity, is to define your core SEL supports. So that may be the area that's the newest for folks.
Great. So I just want to share some of the things we've got. Having social contacts or social contracts, doing lots of SEL kind of check-ins, whether thumbs up, thumbs down, or Flipgrid videos, doing good things. Yeah. Awesome.
Beth, I have an example that I was curious if this is something that's considered like a school-wide approach. My children's school, they have over 70 home languages that are spoken at their school. And I know that's a unique environment, and not every school in the state is going to be like that. But there's so many international families that are moving in. And so immediately what the school does is set them up with another family at the school that speaks the same language so that they can have a mentor family and a mentor student to kind of work with them and help them make that transition smooth. Is that something, because that's the unique makeup of the school model where they've kind of met them where they are, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and what an amazing idea and way to like authentically connect families to one another as well. I think that is wonderful, and it's through these types of conversations that we can get ideas like that out and share with others. So I do want to be mindful. I think we have about 4 minutes. So what I could do just really quick is just share really quick what the remaining resources that folks have access to, and then we can move to the optimistic closure or whatever. Brandon,
yeah, and then if people have questions, they can stick around afterwards. But I think getting through that really quickly, and then we can do questions after the 4 o'clock mark, if that works.
All right. So next, we just wanted to point you to a couple of other resources. Again, you just pull this in as you're ready. So one of those is really around database problem solving. And so this work is happening within what we call recommended teaming structures. So again, in your participant notes, you've got a link to that. And you'll notice that a lot of this work, both at the core and intervention level, is happening through like grade level PLCs, grade level teams, whatever you call it in your school and in your district. But you can see a link to a pretty cool infographic that kind of walks through what that looks like at the district and school level. There's also a one-pager that connects you to the problem-solving model. Again, great thing about problem-solving model is it keeps us focused on the things we can control: the instruction, the curriculum, the environment, the data evaluation, to impact all of our learners. With that work, it also helps us with examining the effectiveness of core, helping us to look comprehensively at data evaluation. And as many of you noted, from looking at the data evaluation paragraph, you understand that we're talking, yes, about student data and student outcome data, and we're talking about implementation data. And we would say that's probably even more critical and maybe less focused on. So we're trying to shift that conversation. So as we start looking at our universal screening system, so one of the 2 resources that you'll see there, the thresholds document, which will be what our ECATS MTSS module will be utilizing, and then also data flowcharts. So that kind of helps you to see really big picture how that these school-wide teams are looking at, is this something that based off of our preliminary data that is more something we need to work on across core, or is this more of something we need to work on that's more specific to our intervention system? So both of those are there. You'll see we're thinking about the whole child across all 4 of those buckets of data. I mean, it's pulling together all of that work, determining the health of core, and then thinking about who are those students that may be at risk and matching them to pre-planned supports. And then finally, so the last thought, I believe, is just kind of bringing home some shifts in this shift from the old RTI MTSS to the new MTSS, which does have the old PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, integrated into it. So before, we thought more about individual data, one student at a time. Teacher initiates, hey, I've got concern about this student, and then really what happens sometimes with that is because there's not really clear systems, there's not real consistency in terms of data decision rules. Often we end up waiting for students to be connected with intervention services, or just really focusing on that core work that we need to be focused on. So it becomes a wait to fail model. So what we want to do is to shift all of those where we're starting to look more at comparative data and really using that to help us understand where we need to focus on the work, that we really are moving more toward a team-based referral that's really grounded in a problem-solving model, using the early warning system and leveraging those standard, what we call standard protocol or standard treatment protocols. So just would like to close with a thank you for your time and looking forward to addressing any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth and Ann. So for our optimistic closure, we'd love for you to share in the chat your answer to one of the following. What most excites you about this work? What will you share with peer art teachers or just other colleagues at your school? And what struck you the most about learning, about the learning that you obtained today? So any of those that you would like to answer or that you feel called to share. And I see I'm excited to dig into these materials in the Live Binder. There's so much detail out there that I had no idea existed. Yes, and we hope that you share these resources with your teachers for sure. I appreciate that a wide net is being cast to facilitate early intervention for all students. This is very different from the model I grew up with. Excellent. Many tools I can use to help better meet the needs of my students where they are at. That's the key. Find a way to be included. I think I can use some of this data today to create reasons to be included somehow. That is our hope, that you feel empowered to take this information, to your administrators. Brandon, are you talking?
I did catch myself this time. So just a reminder that in MTSS, core means instruction that every child or is available to every single child. But if your school also doesn't include arts as core, I want to point you to the Every Student Succeeds Act, which defines music and the arts explicitly as part of every child's core academic instruction. If you want more information on that, feel free to reach out to me, or I would say pretty much any of our professional organizations have done a great job promoting that and getting that out as well. All right.
Wonderful reflections here. These are awesome. And we will try to include all of these in the slide deck for you as well. Mm-hmm. Brandon?
Well, don't go away yet. So if you would like to receive some continuing education unit credits for today's session, we would love to give them to you. And so if you can say we're just shared the survey link in the chat here, and please make sure to double, triple, quadruple check your email address. Make sure that it's correct, because you will you will automatically be sent your certificate of attendance for this session to whatever email address that you provide inside the survey. So make sure that it's the right one. If for some reason you don't receive it within 24 hours, please do reach out to me. Sometimes we have glitches and sometimes there's just a small error, and I can download the attendance certificate and just send it straight to you via email if there's an issue. If you are watching this via recording, please do know that we are asking you to provide the share link on your participant notes as just an artifact for your participation. For all of you who are here today, we have your attendance recorded as part of WebEx. So we would love to see your thoughts in your reflection or participant note reflections, but you are not required to submit them today. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out on this slide, you can share today's recording on Facebook. That is, if you click on the word Facebook, it will take you straight to the recording that we are actually recording right now. If you would like to share the recording in the webinar archive, you can click there and it takes you directly to the section for this webinar, and that information to access the recording will be updated no later than tomorrow. You can share your reflection journal with peers and district arts leaders. I know we have a lot of district arts leaders on this call. Please share all of this with your arts teachers. If you want us or Beth to connect with your teachers separately, reach out to us and let us know how we can support you and your teachers in the field. We are here to support every teacher, all 7,000 and I think 26 of them, and whoever has been hired since we pulled down those statistics. So thank you so much for being here today. We'll go ahead and stay on for a few minutes for anybody who has lingering questions. And otherwise, if you are filling out your survey, we appreciate you. And tomorrow morning, an email should go out with all of the links of the Padlet, the participant notes, the recordings, the Facebook recording, the slide deck, everything that you might need. If for some reason you've lost it, it should come out tomorrow in an email. I think that was everything.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. And thank you so much to Beth and Anne for sharing your expertise with our arts educators. We are very grateful for you both. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to stay on.
Go ahead and write them in the chat if you do have questions, and that might be the easiest way for us to facilitate a conversation.
And other than that, we are free. Do we want to stop the live stream, Brandon? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, again.